I was 10 years old, 1977, when Star Wars came out, and I stood in the lines for hours. I sat on the floor in the movie theater. They used to let you do that. It was the special effects. I was in love with it. I had all the sci-fi magazines. I had all the special effects magazines. It blew my doors off because at that point, what we had was like Star Trek. So it was rubber reptile masks and styrofoam boulders. Being able to see those worlds look realistic, it wasn't like anything anybody had ever seen before. And that's what drew me into it. My guidance counselor in high school, his advice to me was take a typing class because if you know how to type, you can always find a job. And that was the only advice that I received. What they used to do was they would put us all on a bus and take us out to the community college because they had a computer. They gave everybody 10 minutes to go sit at a terminal and you could research occupations and careers. What is the average pay? How much education do you need to do this and what kind? One of the last ones said, what percentage of women are currently employed in this position? And everything that I put in that had to do with film, it came back as 0%. I wish I could tell you that my first thought was, screw that. I'm going to be the one that does it. However, I literally just thought to myself, oh, I guess you can't do that. And I walked away. And that was that. Cameras were not something you could get your hands on at the time. Cameras were expensive. Steven Spielberg talks about running around the neighborhood with his Super 8 with his friends, but we were poor. That was rich people thing. I don't think I knew anybody who had a film camera. That wasn't something you could get your hands on easily. In my family, my grandfather had the camera, old Kodak with the flash bulb thing on top that you spun around and we would play with the cubes, but we weren't allowed to touch it. I never owned a camera until I was 18, and I got one of those horrible Kodak disc cameras. But that was my first experience actually touching a camera. As I got older, even still, the video cameras were not, again, that was something that was for rich people. I didn't own a video camera till I was 28 years old. I loved it. I taught myself how to edit. They were tape. This was analog still, no digital. Got the equipment to capture the tape, and I had a pirated copy of Sony Vegas. I taught myself how to edit on that, and I burned out 2 laptops in 2 years. They would render for hours and hours, and I'd have to put fans on them because they would get so hot, and I burned up 2 of them. After 15 years of marriage, I got divorced. I had done what everybody told me I was supposed to do. I was supposed to either go work in healthcare or be a teacher. I ended up working in healthcare. Then I got married, and I ran my husband's business from home, and I had kids, and I did what everybody told me I was supposed to do, and then I ended up with nothing. We were in a very poverty-stricken situation. I decided to go back to school to try to do something where I could make more money. When I went back to school I just worked part-time jobs, a whole bunch of them, and I started taking the computer classes, and after 1 semester, the film classes were calling me, and I sort of started taking a couple of those, and then I just switched right over. And from there, I just kept going. When I got to film school, I was 40. I remember my mother saying to me, what the hell are you going to do with that? This is something I've always wanted to do, and I'm going to do it because I want to do it. I said, if I can't get a job after, so what? I will go back to being a receptionist. What difference does it make? It's not going to be worse than what it was before, but at least I will have done it. And I just really wanted to do it. When I was in film school, there was a ton of women. The classes were at least half women. My particular grad class consisted of 7 women. So we were kind of spoiled in the sense that we had all this support and we worked on all of our films together. And then you go out into the industry and there's no women. So when you walk on set, you're the only one. I just need to break into this and then I'll be accepted. And you don't realize that it really isn't ever going to happen. They won't speak to you. They don't talk to you. Nobody makes you feel welcome. You're on a new job. You're nervous. You know, it's your first day and you want to fit in. And often they just ignore you. We did 2 or 3 local car dealership commercials. We were both camera people. And for all 3 of them, when I showed up, he was the DP and I was told I was first camera. For that kind of a shoot, you don't need 2 people on the camera. I basically had to just stand there the whole time. If you're lucky, somebody gives you a bounce board or something so you don't feel like an idiot while you're standing there doing nothing, trying to pretend like you're involved in some fashion. That kind of bait and switch thing happened to me repeatedly, just over and over, where I would show up on a set that I had been hired to shoot on and then find out that they had a guy on the camera and you can just help him out. We got one that was a big commercial. It was in Buffalo, 2-day shoot for a very large, well-known supermarket chain. I showed up and again, I was first camera, but I was so excited because this was it. Actually, it was a big shoot. So they needed 2 people on the camera. So I was, on the sled, pulling focus. I was so excited. I was so happy. I wasn't standing around trying to look busy. We had 2 days of a shoot. So the second day, I see the director there and he has his 6-year-old son with him. What he did was he pulled me off camera and asked me to babysit his kid all day. And I had to sit in the cafe of the supermarket with a child I never met before in my life and watch him play Angry Birds on my phone all day. I got paid, but I was the one that got pulled off the camera. If you say, well, this feels a little bit like this might be, because I'm a woman, what you will get is a man who says, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. My wife, my daughters, they all go through I know exactly what I get it. I know how hard it is, and I know that this stuff happens to you. But in this instance, that's not what this is. And that's what you get every time. So, after the 10, 20 times that you hear that, it is exactly what you thought it was. One of the rules in the film industry is you cannot, under any circumstances, get a reputation for being difficult to work with, or you will get no work, none, okay? So you have to be somebody that people like to work with. So when these things happen and you're treated this way, I've had people say, well, why didn't you just, tell them this, tell them that, tell them no? Because you can't, because if you do, no one will work with you anymore. Then you're the bitch. The man who I worked for at that time had hired me a business awards type shoot where he would shoot video and footage of each of the companies that was up for the award. 2 years in a row, he hired me for camera and never let me touch the camera. That was the bait and switch. And I noticed that there was always one other girl, a young girl, that would show up. I just thought it was kind of odd that it was always a young girl. And he would say, this is a girl from my church, or this is a girl from RIT that is interested in film. And so I'm having her come and help out, that kind of thing. He hired me back for the 3rd year. And when I went, he had 2 girls that year, young girls, very young. They were in the other room and they were doing room tone. So he had me come into the bedroom area with him. He wanted to get shots of the bedroom. Very abruptly made some really dirty remarks to me that were really shocking. I did the nervous giggle. Okay, and just continued on. He came up behind me and started rubbing my back, and I stepped away from him and I walked towards the door to leave the room and realized that they were doing the room tone out there. And because I'm a professional, I did not open the door because you needed quiet. So I wasn't going to ruin their room tone. So I stopped and stood there. And at that point, he came up with the camera and started saying dirty things to me. And as I backed away from him, he was pretending to shoot me with the camera. And he was pushing me forward with the camera until I came up to the bed. And he pushed the camera, into my face and pushed me down on the bed and got on top of me and straddled me and had the camera on my chest and was pressing it so that I could not get up. I'm not sure why he even got off of me, except maybe because there were other people. And the room tone was done because they yelled clear, and he got off of me and I ran out of the room. I was in shock and very quiet. And I pulled both of the girls aside at one point and I told them what had just happened. And I said, "You need to watch out for him." Both of them said, "Oh, he's just like that." So obviously he had done inappropriate things to these little girls as well. I got home and I was furious, and I wrote him an email and told him, "Do not ever contact me again to work for you." About a year later, a policeman knocked on my door and asked to speak with me. And it turned out that he had been arrested for molesting young girls at his church. Apparently, it wasn't the first time that he had been charged out in California and had moved here. He got put on the sex offenders list. Nothing else happened to him. He still works in Rochester. I still see his van driving around for his video company. He still does work here, and nobody knows. I didn't want to work on the sets anymore, and I started doing editing. I really loved the editing, even more than shooting. And it was great because, at that point, we had gotten to a place where we had the cloud computing. I could do work. I did work for people in Australia that sent me footage, and I edited it and sent it back. But you can't make any money doing that either. It's gig work. It's really hard to get. There's a lot of competition. There are 1 million people on Fiverr offering to do things that we used to get paid hundreds of dollars for, and they'll do it for you for $50. So it's really difficult to make a living, and I didn't want to work on sets anymore. I realized I have to. There's no way that I can make enough money doing this. It's very hard. We all know each other in Rochester, all the film people. Somebody that I knew of that I hadn't worked for called me up and asked me to run camera for Buffalo Buttes hockey. I'm a hockey fan. I was like, yes, I will be there. So it was for all the home games in Buffalo, and it was a good wage per game. I walked in, and it was literally no one would speak to me. And I walked into where he was in his control room. He ignored me for probably 20 minutes and then finally said, "Yeah, you're going to do the camera on the one goal." So I went out there and I figured out what I was doing. I tried to talk to a couple of the guys that were running the other cameras, and, they just sort of looked through me. And I went and got on camera and I shot the game. And it was great. I loved it. It was great. I was on one end of the goal. There was another guy on the other end of the goal who never spoke to me once. I don't even know what his name was. He just never spoke to me. And then they had a kid in the middle that was on that camera on the top that shows the whole thing. For every game, he brought his girlfriend with him. She would go in the room where they were doing the live stream because the director didn't like to do the clock. So he would pay her $75 every game to sit in there and push that button. After so many weeks of this, I showed up and there was a guy there that I knew. I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm filling in because one of the kids was out sick." It was the kid who brought his girlfriend. And I knew this guy was a photographer and he wanted to get into video, but he didn't know video at all. I walked over to go to my camera and we were talking, and he followed with me and got this confused look on his face and said, "I'm running this camera." I said, "You're what?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, you're running the clock." I said, "What do you mean I'm running the clock?" and he said he wants you to do the clock. So because the little girl wasn't there, he just left this camera on the top stationary and put someone who never ran a video camera in his life, let alone during a sports broadcast, on my camera and made me go sit in the room with him and push the button for the clock. And he paid me $75 that night instead of the rate that I normally get. And that was the moment that I was done. I don't think I went anywhere. I didn't get dressed. I was really depressed. I miss it, particularly the editing, because that's something that I can do at home and not have to work with anybody. As much as I want to, I have no confidence anymore. And it sort of paralyzes me with sort of grief and fear, which is sad because I really loved it and I do miss it. But the thought of it makes me very anxious now. I work 2 jobs. I teach because I don't make enough money with the teaching. And my other job, I work from home and I'm on the phone. And that's it. So I literally do not work for or with men anymore. That I realize that I actually have set things up that way. And I admit it, I'm angry and I'm jaded. And I don't want to frame this as, I don't want to say, well, what can women do, that are interested in getting into film? I don't know. I don't have a solution. And I think that women have been complaining about this since the dawn of time. This is not new. And if we haven't changed it by now, I would say that it's not our responsibility to change. I'm tired of being told, how to manage it, how to live with it, how to circumvent it. My hope is that men will realize that they need to change their enculturation. I think men need to search within themselves and connect with each other and decide to stand up for themselves to get rid of that. And I don't think anything will change until they do. So I don't have a lot of hope that I will see it in my lifetime, but I do hope it will happen eventually.